All right, so let's dive into this whole Christian-Muslim alliance thing that's been floating around online.
Okay.
It's gotten some traction, this idea of these two faiths, which, let's be honest, have
Yeah.
often been seen as kind of at odds, suddenly joining forces to like push back against secularism.
Right.
It's definitely gotten people talking. And figures like Nicholas Fuentes and E. Michael Jones, they're kind of in the thick of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because you have these figures, right, who represent kind of different strands of thought within this whole sphere. Fuentes, he's known for this, well, shall we say his very pointed rhetoric.
Yeah, I think inflammatory might be one way to put it.
Inflammatory, there you go.
Hmm.
So he occupies this, well, more of a fringe position, you could say. Whereas Jones, he's got like a more established presence, although
Still controversial, though.
oh, absolutely. Still controversial. But he's got more of a foothold in, like, certain intellectual circles, let's say.
Okay, so different players, different levels of influence, but all kind of circling this idea of like, hey, maybe there's something to this whole alliance thing. But I'm curious, why is this conversation bubbling up now? The source we're looking at, Do Not Tempt God. It starts off with this really vivid image, Vladimir Putin, right?
Mhm.
Solemnly, like reverently venerating this Quran. And it's not just any Quran. It's like gold encrusted.
Hmm.
The whole setting is very, heavy with symbolism.
Oh, for sure.
And it seems like this image, it's sparking this anxiety about whether, is there actual strength in embracing another faith, or is it like a sign of, I don't know, maybe straying from your own?
Well, and I think that image is so striking, right? Because it plays directly into one of the things that the source keeps bringing up about Islam, which is this idea of robustness,
Yeah.
like this unwavering, almost like unshakable commitment to tradition, to these very like fixed values.
Right, right. And it's almost like they're contrasting that with what some Christians see happening in their own communities,
Exactly.
which is this sort of like dwindling influence, right? This struggle with secularism, with all these changing social norms.
And it's like they're looking at Islam and they're seeing this resilience, this strength that they feel is maybe fading in their own faith.
It's like, man, I wish we had that. But is this like a new thing? Have we seen this before? This impulse to like band together different faiths?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even the source hints at this when they bring up the whole post-World War II era and the rise of that, that term Judeo-Christianity.
Which, just to be clear, we're talking about the idea that Judaism and Christianity, they share this common spiritual heritage, right?
Right, exactly. And so after the war, with all that horror, there was this sense among some, like, okay, Christianity needs a win here. We need to bolster things. And finding common ground with Judaism, that offered this way to, like, present a united front against who else?
Secularism. So is that what we're seeing here again? Is this whole Christian-Muslim alliance thing, is it just another version of that? Like, let's find strength from an external source to, I don't know, to kind of prop up our own faith that feels under siege?
That's the big question the source is wrestling with, right? And it raises another point. Even if we, like, entertain this idea of an alliance, is there even a difference between a purely political alliance and a religious one? Because Do Not Tempt God argues that there's a very, like, firm line there.
Okay, so what is that line? What are they saying?
They're saying politics, that's like what? It's a game, right? It's all pragmatism. You make alliances to get stuff done, to achieve certain goals, even if it means, setting aside some differences here and there. But religion's different. Religion digs into those core beliefs, into those, like, capital T truths.
The big stuff.
Exactly. And what the source seems to be getting at is you can't just, like, brush those fundamental differences under the rug for the sake of, political convenience.
Right, because at that point, what are you even protecting? If you're, like, tossing out your core beliefs in order to fight against, I don't know, like, secularism, aren't you kind of just becoming more secular yourself?
That's the irony, isn't it? And this source, they don't shy away from that. In fact, they go even further and throw out this phrase that's really loaded, the insufficient Christ.
Whoa, okay, yeah, that one stopped me in my tracks a little bit. So in this context, what are they getting at with that phrase?
It's provocative, right? But I think it cuts right to the heart of what makes this source so uneasy about this whole thing. It's like they're saying that by even feeling the need to reach out to another faith, to make this alliance, you're kind of implying that Christ's teachings on their own aren't enough to handle the modern world.
So it's almost like saying, if you have to borrow beliefs or practices from another faith to, like, make your own faith stronger, then maybe your faith isn't as strong as you think it is.
Exactly. It calls into question the whole foundation of faith itself. Makes you ask, where does true strength really come from? Is it from seeking external validation, or is it about standing firm in your own convictions, even when it's hard, even when you're facing opposition?
So you're saying that looking for strength through this kind of alliance, it could actually be a sign of weakness. That's kind of hard to hear.
It is tough. And I think it taps into this deeper insecurity, right?
Hmm.
This fear that a lot of us have that, well, in today's world, our beliefs are always being tested.
Yeah.
And maybe we're not equipped to defend them on our own.
Yeah, especially when you're surrounded by all these messages about how strong and sure other belief systems are.
Right. And remember all those perceived strengths of Islam we talked about. The source kept coming back to those.
Right. The robustness, the unwavering tradition, all of that.
Exactly. It's easy to see how those things, especially when you're feeling unsure, they could start to look really appealing. Like, oh, maybe that's the quick fix.
If I just align myself with something that seems stronger, then my own beliefs will be safer.
It's like that temptation for a shortcut. But what this source is saying is, no, true strength,
Yeah.
that has to come from within. It has to come from a deep understanding of your own beliefs, from your own commitment to them.
So it's not enough to just say, I believe this. You have to
Yeah.
really grapple with it.
You've got to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
Doubt, questions going back and forth, that's all part of it. It's how you arrive at that place of like real personal conviction.
So it's not blind faith. It's not just blindly accepting what you're told. It's more like active.
It's about engaging with your faith, with your beliefs
Mhm.
on every level, intellectually, emotionally, the whole nine yards.
Okay, so then how do we even how do we put that into practice? This whole conversation about alliances and the insufficient Christ, it feels very, I don't know, theoretical. How does this apply to the average person listening who's thinking, okay, interesting theology lesson, but what does this have to do with my life?
Right, right, I hear that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Think about it. We're constantly forming alliances, even in our regular everyday lives.
Really? How?
Every choice you make, it involves some kind of alliance. You
Mhm.
choose your friends, you choose your partner, your career, right?
Yeah.
You're saying, these are the values I align myself with. These are the beliefs, the goals that I'm going to throw in with.
So it's not just about formal agreements between groups. It's more about recognizing those choices we make all the time.
Yes, about understanding the alliances, both big and small, that we're making in every area of our lives.
Okay, so give me an example.
Have you ever felt pressure to downplay your beliefs, to kind of, I don't know, dim your light a little bit so you fit in with a certain group, or just to avoid conflict?
Oh, yeah, are you kidding? I think we've all been there, right?
And that, in a way, that's a form of alliance building. You're making a choice in that moment. You're choosing to prioritize belonging, harmony, whatever it might be, over staying true to yourself.
And you're not saying those choices are bad, are you? I mean, sometimes keeping the peace is important.
No, not at all. But it's about being aware of those choices, of the trade-offs, right? Like, okay, what am I gaining here? And what am I maybe possibly giving up? What am I compromising?
So being mindful of the costs, the compromises we make, whether they're big or small, in the name of connection, security, or just fitting in.
Yes. And then asking yourself, are these compromises that are strengthening me, weakening me, do they line up with, those core values, those beliefs that we were talking about?
Mhm.
Because those are the alliances, those are the compromises that really make a difference in the long run.
So it's about being intentional then, not just going with the flow, not taking the easy way out, but really thinking about what we're signing up for with each choice we make.
Choosing the alliances that feel true to who you are, even if it means sometimes standing apart from the crowd a little bit.
Which is hard, but then that brings us back to that phrase from the source, the truth stands alone. The truth stands alone. It's powerful, but man, it's also kind of intimidating, are we really supposed to go through life solo, just relying on our own gut feeling, especially in a world where everything's so connected?
Well, and it's funny, right? Because it reveals this tension that I think we all kind of wrestle with. On the one hand, we're wired for connection.
Yeah.
Humans, we're social creatures.
Right, we crave it.
We crave it. We want to find our people,
Yeah.
Build communities, share those beliefs and values, find strength in that shared purpose.
Yeah. And like we were saying before, history's full of these examples of people coming together, forming these big alliances, political ones, religious ones, to survive, to make progress, or just to feel that sense of hey, we're in this together.
Exactly. But then, on the flip side, there's something to be said for, that individual journey, figuring things out for yourself, coming to your own conclusions.
Yeah, blazing your own trail.
Exactly. And sometimes those two impulses, they clash a little bit,
Yeah.
like the need to belong versus the drive to define yourself on your own terms.
Totally. So then how do we make sense of that? Is it even possible to fully embrace that idea of the truth stands alone when the world's telling you, no, you got to compromise, you got to collaborate, you got to make alliances?
$1 million question. And honestly, I don't think there's one right answer that fits everyone. But what this source is pushing us to do is to really look at the alliances we're making, to examine them. Like, are we entering into this alliance because we share something real, something fundamental, or are we doing it out of fear or convenience, just to avoid being the odd one out?
So it's about being really honest with ourselves about why we're linking up with someone or something else.
Yes. Is it genuine connection and understanding that we're looking for? Or is it more about, I don't know, validation,
Mm.
security, maybe even just like a way to avoid doing the hard work of figuring things out for ourselves?
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one to admit sometimes. But you're right, it all comes back to that self-awareness.
And that, I think, is where the truth stands alone. Becomes less about like isolating yourself and more about really knowing yourself. Cultivating that inner strength, that sense of this is who I am and this is what I stand for, so that when you do enter into those alliances, those relationships, those communities, you don't lose sight of that.
So it's not about shutting everyone out. It's about engaging with the world, but from a place of like, I see you, I hear you, but I'm not going to compromise who I am at my core.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that maybe, just maybe, the most important alliance you'll ever build is the one you have with yourself, your values, your beliefs, your own unique path to truth.
And from that place of inner strength and knowing yourself, you can go out and you can connect with others in a way that feels real, that feels right. You can handle the ups and downs, the complexities, with a little more wisdom, a little more authenticity.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here. We've been on this whole journey today, exploring this idea of alliances, of truth, of where we find our strength.
It's a lifelong journey, really.
It really is. And sometimes it means standing alone, and sometimes it means finding that strength in connection, in shared purpose. And hey, sometimes it's probably a little bit of both. So until next time, keep those questions coming, keep searching, keep exploring, and remember that pursuit of truth. It's an adventure, and it takes courage, but it also takes an open mind. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.